Hello everyone, welcome to our channel Mais Africa. I'm Francisco Santos and I will be your host on this journey where we will explore the African continent in conversation with our guests, discussing captivating topics related to Africa. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give us a like and hit the bell to make sure you don't miss our upcoming interviews. In today's grand interview, I'm joined by my colleague Vanessa Africani. Without further ado, let's get to it. Miss Iturralde, welcome and thank you for graciously agreeing to this interview. Our audience is eager to get to know you and the person behind the diplomat. So before we dive into the questions, we'd love to learn a little bit more about you. Could you share something about your journey and your experience that led you to the current role as the economic consigliere at the South African Embassy in Brasília?
Well, thank you so much. Firstly, thank you so much, Vanessa and Francisco, for having me on this interview panel. By all means, I was born in Bolivia, and I think I'm part of the globalization process that, because I was born in Bolivia but exported to South Africa, and I lived a great part of my life in South Africa, but also in various other parts of the world. But after graduating from university, I went to London and I started working at the Bolivian Embassy. Was my first official job. I also then worked at an investment promotion agency called Sepro. So I received a lot of training there from MIGA, the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, which is part of the World Bank. I worked with equity funds on how to boost the well-being of companies. And so it was really a fascinating period where I had a lot of structural learning. I then became an independent consultant, also promoting investments. I assisted persons and delegations who were on study tours to learn more about specific sectors. So organized meetings, not only with industry leaders, but also with government officials. So once again, and interpreting came in there as well. So once again, that was a fascinating phase of who I am. I did my master's in Bolivia with the Catholic University of Bolivia and the Harvard Institute for International Development. And one of my research papers was corruption in the penitentiary regime, in the penitentiary system. So I went there to interview people that were detained, both men and women, came across some of them that were South Africans. So, you know, I got involved and got to really see the intertwined team effort between Interpol, drug enforcement agencies, diplomats and the judiciary, the social workers, and that too was a fascinating period. And I got more and more involved while I was in Bolivia, working with the South African embassy that was actually accredited in Peru, or it was based in Peru, but it was also accredited to Bolivia. And I was then appointed as the honorary consul designate. And I did that for quite some time. And then in one of those delegations of people from South Africa that came to Bolivia was a South African delegate with the Minister of the Presidency, the late Mr. Esop Pahad, who then said to me, Cecilia, you belong in South Africa at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And that is basically how this whole journey started.
Thank you very much for your explanation. It was very interesting, and you have an interesting life. I can say that.
Very much so, yes.
So, Cecilia, your linguistic abilities are truly impressive, covering Spanish, French, English, and Afrikaans. How have these language skills shaped your journey in diplomacy, particularly when dealing with African and South African contexts?
Hi, Vanessa. Nice to see you on screen. Well, as I said, I was not. I was born in Bolivia, and I attended the German school. Then, when my family moved to South Africa, I attended an English school. Afrikaans was a mandatory language. In high school, I had to choose a third language. I chose French. Here in Brazil, I have developed a great level of Portuñol because at this stage, that's all I can master. So languages have really been very much present in my life. Before I joined the Department of International Relations, for instance, in South Africa, I was called to assist to interpret for President Thabo Mbeki and the late President Hugo Chavez. So although I had done interpreting prior to this event, nothing was as big and with a high-profile delegation as the Hugo Chavez President Thabo Mbeki situation. So that really got me very much involved in the interpreting part of diplomacy, although I was not yet a diplomat. But I also received a lot of training from the interpreters that are at the European Parliament in Strasbourg, also from several universities in South Africa, both the University of Pretoria and the University of Northwest. I underwent training as an interpreter because that was going to be a part of being a diplomat, having already Spanish and English as two major languages. To the extent that, when I did join the department, I was also tasked to teach the ambassadors that were selected to go out on posting, to teach them Spanish. So I had to now suddenly design course material to teach diplomats. And one of them was a gentleman by the name of Tony Leon, who wrote a book called The Accidental Ambassador, and he actually makes reference to me in his book. It's only a one-line reference, but good to know that he acknowledged the value of people that teach languages. So indeed, I think languages have helped me tremendously. I've worked in countries like Burkina Faso, which is a Francophone country. I've also assisted as a diplomat with the Equatorial Guinea when it was primarily still a Spanish-speaking country, because they are now migrating to be a Portuguese-speaking country. And I've worked during the World Cup when we were trying to sign bilateral agreements with various other countries. I worked also with languages in what we call the NAT joints, which is a group of national security, also for the World Cup, on how to deal with cases should there be problems with fans, etc., during the World Cup. So languages have really played a fundamental role in my life. But besides the importance of languages as a diplomat, be it in Africa or South African contexts, I think the meaningful part of it is really just that you really get to communicate with the people of that country, try and understand their idiosyncrasies and get to understand them better. And also from the human point of view, you get to understand who they are. So that's a very enriching experience.
Managing roles in the private sector, diplomatic training, and economic counseling is not a small feat. How do you find balance among these diverse aspects of your career, and how do they combine to your effectiveness as a diplomat?
Francisco, women are born with a talent. It's called multitasking. We are naturally mothers, we are chauffeurs, we are psychologists, we are breadwinners, we are everything. When we get to the workplace, we are told that we have to do more with less. So you learn also to be a creative thinker, to accomplish more with less resources, whatever the resources might be. We also have to, my exposure in working with the private sector, with agencies, with as a consultant, and then being put on a desk that was the diplomatic training branch at the Department of International Relations. And subsequently now as the economic counselor here in Brasilia. it really just teaches you that you have to learn and adapt constantly, because that is the situation of a diplomat. We are never static in one place. And unfortunately, the geopolitics also is not static. It is a constant change where there's conflict one minute, there's a trade crisis in another, there's a political or electoral process that has not been legitimized, whether it's climate change that has derailed people's livelihoods, whether it's elections, whether it's strikes, whatever is happening at a global level and how it interacts with bilateral relations with that specific country or in the multilateral fora. It really is a constant adaptation and learning curve. So we learn different things, we adapt to circumstances, and you definitely have to learn to multitask as multitask, but also have the support of a great team. Today, as an economic counselor, I cover many portfolios here in Brazil, from agriculture to trade, investment promotion. I deal with startups and academia. I deal with the science, tech, and innovation portfolio, tourism. So it's really broad. It demands a lot. It can be hectic at times, but what is rewarding is when you see results. But besides that, it's also the pleasure of meeting very interesting people from very diverse backgrounds or ideologies, or bringing new things to the table. So that in itself is very inspiring.
Cecilia, having served as South Africa's honorary consul in Bolivia, you bring a unique perspective. How do you perceive the evolving cultural and economic ties between Brazil and South Africa, and what collaborative opportunities do you foresee?
Vanessa, right now, as we speak, Ambassador Mavimbela, the South African ambassador to Brazil, he's currently in the state of Bahia, together with other 14 African ambassadors, and they are attending the commemorations of Black Consciousness Month. So what ties Brazil and the continent, the African continent, is, of course, from the colonial history of Brazil, many Africans were brought to Brazil as slaves. And so Bahia has a high concentration of the Afro-Brazilian population. So right now, Ambassador has been, together with various other African heads of mission, have been in Bahia, hosted by the governor of the state of Bahia, meeting with entities, the Steve Bikos, the Olodum, and all the Afrocentric and Africanness that is so common between the continent and, of course, South Africa and Brazil. So culturally, there's a lot. There's a history that is tied to, that links the continent of Africa to Brazil, which in itself is really a subcontinent. So you do have the largest concentration of African diaspora here. So from religion to music to cultural aspirations, there is really a lot going on. With regard to sort of the economic ties, once again, we are in the same sort of latitude, Brazil and South Africa, or parts of Africa. So we have similar climatic conditions, we have similar land types, so that we're able to both be strong countries that feature agriculture and mining under their portfolios. So there's a lot of similarities. But now Africa as a continent has got the highest concentration of arable land that is still not used. South Africa and Africa have got deserts, and you'd probably ask, well, what's the good of, how good can deserts be? Well, today, to be able to set up solar farms, to be able to produce renewable energy, we have a rising population in South Africa and in Africa overall, and basically the population in Africa is growing at a pace that today we are almost the same as China's population. But whereas Africa's population is rising, China's population is in decline. We look at the European Union, they have an aging population. They also don't have a high fertility of young people investing in family. So the role of Africa, not just South Africa, will be one of addressing labor market shortages, co-working with Brazil in renewable energies, which is definitely something that we have in common, co-working in agriculture, because we do have the space to produce more agriculture to be able to guarantee food security for this, the population in Africa doubling by the year 2050. So there's definitely a lot that is in common. South Africa also is home to the highest concentration of the platinum group metals, which are fundamental resource to produce green hydrogen, which is also being produced here in Brazil. Out of green hydrogen, of course, you will be able to decarbonize industry. You'll be able to look at decarbonizing industries like steel industry, which is a prominent industry in both our countries, which is highly contaminating. But the good thing from green hydrogen is also that you get ammonia, and ammonia is used to produce fertilizers. Now, Brazil is a giant in agriculture. South Africa has got a lot of agriculture as well. So that in itself feeds into job creation, food security, and the overall well-being of the population. So we definitely also have something very much in common with Brazil in that we have nature conservation and wildlife conservation. You know, we've got a lot of wild animals and parks. Brazil has the Pantanal, Amazon, and other biomes. So we definitely do collaborate even now on this in this regard. So I think that yes, innovation. South Africa is Africa's innovation hub. Agriculture, renewable energies, unblocking food scarcity to be able to feed the rising population in the world. I think definitely this is something that we definitely have in common, and that it's something that should continue to be manifested. You know, we as diplomats, we come and go every 4 years. So we plant our little seed with the hope that whoever takes our place next will water those seeds and we'll see the fruit of many of our initiatives that we don't get to see during our 4-year span.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you so much for your explanations and everything that you've been doing at the South African Embassy.
My pleasure.
Before moving on to the next question, I'd like to take a quick pause to thank you for your support so far. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the perfect moment. Click the subscribe button, give us a like, and don't forget to activate the bell to not miss any exciting details. If you're already subscribed, thank you for your support. Back to the interview. Let's go back a little. I find your experience as a language trainee and interpreter fascinating. How was this role influenced diplomatic communications, especially when working with high-profile figures like Presidents Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma? Okay,
well, first of all, language training is easy. Interpreting is frightening. It is a very stressful job to perform because people have different accents. So sometimes it can be problematic to understand what they're saying because of accents. Some people speak in a more poetic way, and therefore it's very difficult to understand them, even if you're English speaking. The fact that presidents and ministers and delegations, high-level delegations, meet and they need an interpreter means also that you have to be very savvy in the various agenda items on technical terminology. So you need to constantly be prepared in order to be able to jump over all these obstacles. So you need to read a lot, you need to be up to date on foreign policy discussions and whatever is fundamental on South Africa's bilateral relations with the delegations from those specific countries. It also obliges you be a good public speaker, because you tend to, you're not always in a cabin doing simultaneous interpreting. Sometimes you're standing right next to these high profile personalities, doing consecutive interpreting. So you have to have the same authority as they have, because you're conveying their message. And I think it pushes you to be confident, or at least to fake it until you make it, as we say. Yeah, so the experience that I had, I think, in Bolivia with receiving delegations, etc., which were much smaller, I think did assist me tremendously. I think also my experience in various phases of my life, in having lived and improved my language in one, wherever that was, and studied further in my languages, I think that definitely that has made it a lot, I wouldn't say easier, but it gives you a greater sense of confidence when you are thrown into these deep situations. You know, you're not just speaking or conveying a message, but you're doing it also in front of a lot of media, in front of a high-level profile audience, and with a lot of terminology and jargon. So it is quite stressing, but as I say, you have to be on your feet the whole time.
Cecilia, let's dive into your recent projects. The Blue Economy Initiative and Leadership Training in Singapore sounds intriguing. How do this experience shape your views on sustainable development goals, particularly in the African context?
Okay, so the Blue Economy and the Singapore Leadership Training are actually not current. I did those some time ago now, but of course they play a huge role. You know, I mean, the Blue Economy was a course that was offered by the Hague's Clingendale Institute, and the leadership program, obviously, by the Civil Service School in Singapore. And of course, their level of expertise and focus was overwhelming, very professional, very high. But now also you have to come to understand that South Africa is a water scarce country, right? And as are many countries in Africa. So it does shock you to see when you are in a different country, or even in your own country, and you see people cleaning their driveway with water. It's a scarce resource. Or when you go to countries where you see that there's absolutely no, because they don't have water restrictions, that they really use water without any limitations. And the same can be said about pollution. Some countries do not have the education or the awareness of what public contamination and the impact thereof on soil quality, on livelihoods, on animals, on children, on even foreseeing, you know, rainy season when everything is now blocked because people have just kept on throwing things into the street. The drains are blocked. Come rainy season, there's huge floods, and it has got huge side effects affecting livelihoods and economic well-being. So definitely these projects, but also your lifetime experience is important, because you're able to then not preach, but educate. How do you educate countries that are maybe poorer, people that are not aware, because everything comes through education. So how do you reach out to communities that are not aware of the misusage of water or the contamination? In South Africa, we have a energy deficit, so we learn, don't leave your lights on if you're not in that room. Don't just waste electricity or consume electricity unnecessarily. So these are things that are probably not on anyone's agenda if they are not impacted by it. But you know, another SDG is also the issue of the inclusion and empowerment of women and the youth. And South Africa plays also a very prominent role there. There's a UN Resolution 1325 which addresses this. And ironically, you know, we're in a situation where we have so many conflicts right now, and we see that women and children or the youth are the primary targets. And when D-Day comes, where we have to talk about peace talks and peace negotiations, the voice of women is never really included at this table, yet they are the biggest victims of conflict. And so South Africa, with collaboration of Norway, for instance, and also with the Hague Clingendale Institute, we used to run these conflict resolution workshops, teaching the youth in South Africa, women at grassroots levels, international women, African women, on how to be peace builders, how to negotiate and work towards peaceful ways of diluting conflict. So I think that even on issues that are just normal, the issue of startups, when we have when we work with startups between South Africa and Brazil, Brazil selects its startups based on your objectives. South Africa looks at young female startups, people from previously disadvantaged communities, so Black females, the youth, etc. So we definitely are working towards that resolution 1325.
Great. Nice to hear that. The world needs this change, right? We need to think about the youngest, we need to think about the women, we need to think about the sustainability of the planet and the resources and etc. So this is kind of importance, right? Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It's the only thing that matters today, really.
Yeah.
So, Cecilia, with your extensive experience across different regions, what unique insights do you bring to the economic portfolio in Brazil? Additionally, how do you foresee economic relations involving between Brazil and South Africa in the coming years?
So, when whatever one does in one country most certainly does feed into your repertoire of what you could possibly do in the next country. You learn from past experiences, but you also learn from what other embassies and diplomats are doing. So, I'm about to, I think this is like my final posting abroad. And so I come with about 35 odd years of experience, having lived and worked in various parts of the world, both as a diplomat and as a private person. So I think that with age, that accumulative of experiences comes with a bit of, gives you confidence and hopefully a bit more wisdom. So it definitely does. It does help to be able to work on issues. So I now am working, as I say, with the economic portfolio in Brazil. It's not new to me. This is something that I have been doing in the past when I worked with in Bolivia and I was trained by the Multilateral Investment Agency, which is part of the World Bank, etc. So it's definitely not new, but of course you have to adapt it to work to the Brazilian environment. I think also coming from a South American background, culturally, I feel very much at home here in Brazil, so that also does help you with the interaction with people. The fact that I do speak Spanish and now I speak Portuñol, it also allows me to communicate with greater ease with my Brazilian interlocutors and stakeholders. And of course, that obviously has a huge benefit. Now, with regards to your question regarding relations between South Africa and Brazil and how these might evolve, I think that we're in a fantastic stage right now. I really foresee a lot of cooperation. I think that also the fact that previously the economic portfolio was previously just managed in our consulate general in Sao Paulo, we have now brought the element of economic diplomacy also to Brasilia. So I think that many of the states in this part that the embassy is responsible for, it's the first time that they have an opportunity to discover what South Africa has to offer in terms of trade, in terms of investment opportunities. We're looking at, on Monday, we have a wine tasting event. Thereafter, we have a South African tourism event unfolding where we will be showcasing South Africa's culinary and culture. New concept. It doesn't always have to be scientific or intensive, but the soft skills, the soft issues, and I think definitely that we've seen vast interest from our audience in the state of Distrito Federal, Amazonia, etc. But Brazil to us is also, I mean, we see Brazil as the powerhouse of agriculture. Brazil feeds over 1 billion people on a daily basis. So definitely we have a lot to learn. And we do have bilateral endeavors to strengthen the agricultural landscape in South Africa, to see how best our two-tier agricultural system, because we've got commercial farmers, and then we've got a wide range of small family farmers, primarily from our disadvantaged communities, sort of Black-owned farms that lack the resources or credit to obtain equipment or to obtain the necessary skills to be able to face to agricultural challenges. But then we have the good things like the recent launch of our South African Airways flight to both Johannesburg and to Cape Town. So this really allows a lot more influx of Brazil-South Africa trade, but also tourism. We also have LATAM flights to Johannesburg. So there are options, there's diversity. So I think that by collaborating also with our mineral wealth, with academic initiatives, with startups, focusing on our young, growing workforce, definitely there's a lot of synergy, there's a lot of interest. We obviously, I think, are two powerhouses in our respective areas. South Africa is a powerhouse in the continent. Brazil is a powerhouse in your continent. So I definitely think that based on the synergy that we have on our decarbonizing agendas, our green agendas, our environmental agendas, our agricultural mutual need for cooperation, I think that definitely there's a much going in favor of our two economies.
Cecilia, before we finish and wrap up, a more personal question. Your goal of becoming a fully fledged diplomat and ambassador is inspiring. Could you share the crucial steps you believe aspiring individuals should take to reach similar milestone in diplomatic services?
Wow. Well, I'm definitely not a diplomatic reference, but thank you so much. Well, I think definitely what has helped me has been the use of languages. I've traveled a lot. I have huge level of curiosity. I am deeply vested in political events, so I read up a lot. I'm very active in that domain. So international affairs knowledge has to be really up to date. I think also your work ethic has to be of a high standard. You must have qualities that means persevere, because you don't always succeed. You might have 100 companies that you've reached out for investments and only one has worked out, but you don't give up. You have to persevere. In diplomacy, you can be a generalist or a technical expert. So that opens up a lot of opportunities. I think in my case, I have been a generalist, but every time you go to a different country, you become an expert in specific things because specific things are trending in the geopolitical environment while you are serving in a foreign country. So different things mold your level of expertise, but I'm definitely, I think, more a generalist. But I think that, for instance, the Rio Branco Institute here, which is the diplomatic training academy for Brazil, I attended, I met with the people that work there, and they gave me a very good understanding of the selection criteria. Brazil receives about 67,000 applicants per year to do the diplomatic training, and ultimately 30 or 40 are selected through very, very grueling entry exams. And really, I think that they look for that well-rounded individual. You must have good understanding of your country's history, geography, of global history, geography, and international relations, of international law, of humanitarian aspects, of languages, etc., etc. But I always say, teaching someone, you can always teach someone new skills, but you can't teach people to be kind. So I think that the soft skills also are critical in being a diplomat, or just in general. A good person is, I think, fundamental when selecting a new employee, wherever they may be.
Thanks for sharing. And I would like to thank you for your acceptance of our invitation, right, Francisco, to come here and talk a little bit more about South Africa. It's a pleasure to us always being here and bringing more information about Africa. So I would like to thank you. And once again, when you want to come back, we are here to listen to you and to receive you. Okay, thank you so much, Cecilia.
Thank you, Francisco. Thank you, Vanessa. And thank you always for promoting the voice of Africa. I think it's definitely a continent worth investing in and learning more about. Thank you so much.
Ms. Iturralde, on behalf of our audience and mine, thank you for sharing your valuable insights with us. Your journey is truly inspiring, and your perspective on the diplomatic landscape between Brazil and South Africa are enlightening. I wish you great success in all your diplomatic endeavors. So until the next time.
Thank you, Francisco. Much appreciated. Thank you to you both.
And thus, we come to the end of this interview. I hope you enjoyed it. Before you switch to another channel, let us know what you thought of the interview in the comments. Very important, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the bell to receive more contents in the future. In the upcoming Grande Interviews, we promise to bring engaging stories and incredible guests. Thank you very much for your dedication, and until next time. We'll be here, always, full of enthusiasm and love for Africa.